I am muted. No, I'm not. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is the Complete Sinner's Guide. I am one of your co-hosts, Tyler Fowler, and with me, as always, my partner in crime, my brother in the Lord, Joshua Davison. Brother, what is going on, my man?
Hey, bud, that was a pretty good intro there.
Yeah, just came up with it off the top, So it's good.
Yeah, that was impressive how quickly you caught it, though. So good reflexes, but I'm doing okay. Had a pretty good day at work, and though I'm having automotive and financial hiccups throughout the time that I'm spending this week, it's actually been a really productive week at work, and it's been kind of a fun time. JD, you got some feedback there, bud. It's been kind of a fun time to spend with my guys in the program, and today was cool because I had a dinner, not a dinner, I guess it's a dinner, Christmas party with my coworkers at the rescue mission, and for those that are listening who don't know that, I'm the maintenance person for the Bay Area Rescue Mission in Richmond, California. It's a Christian-based 12-month recovery program and a homeless shelter, community kitchen, and donation warehouse and chapel. And so there's 5, soon to be 6 buildings that I'm caring for regularly. And today, all of the staff members that are involved in keeping this ministry moving all came together to have a Christmas party with one another. And one of my favorite parts about that is that the CEO and one of the other administrative employees get together and practice beforehand and set up some songs so that we can have worship at our business meeting.
Yeah.
So that's pretty unique. And I just had a good day. It was a really blessing to be around these people. They're very passionate, and it just kind of it reminds me why it's good to be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's so refreshing to be around people that are full of love and kindness, and like aren't trying to be the biggest presence in the room. They just don't have to be, because everybody's ready to love one another, and so it's a really nice place to. I just love my job.
That's awesome, man. So the video that you sent me, or the video that you sent in the group chat with everybody worshiping, where was that at exactly?
That's actually at the men's program building. That's our West Wing. It's part of our cafeteria area for like mealtime for the people in the program, as well as the local community and the people staying at the homeless shelter. So we serve whoever is hungry. And there are set times that people can come by and get food and stuff. And, all they have to do is get their temperature checked and use some hand sanitizer and keep their distance from everybody. And they get a warm meal and a place to sit and some fresh water and a bathroom to use. And it's one of those things that, sometimes as very lucky, blessed people, we don't realize what we have until you don't have it.
Right.
And so, it's really it's a necessity for a community that doesn't have a lot of wealth, because Richmond's not the richest city in the world.
Right.
Richmond, California, it's not known for being the high riser, money making machine.
For those who don't know, the movie Coach Carter was actually based on Richmond, California, where you work, right?
Yeah, actually that school's not far from where I work. So yeah,
that's exactly a good movie. Right. If y'all haven't seen that movie, Coach Carter, a really, really good movie.
It really was.
But JD Martin just popped on with us tonight. JD, how's it going, brother? It's been a while since you've been on CSG. What's been new in your life, man?
Yeah, it's been going good. I think the biggest new thing that I can say was I became officially an elder at my church. I was already functioning.
Congratulations. That's fantastic, dude.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was already functioning essentially as an elder. I was on staff, and I went from a pastoral assistant to associate pastor, which is just basically meaning that I became ordained. So I think that's the biggest thing. I've been kind of focusing, leading up to that and other things. I've been focusing on not doing too much online ministry, but recently I've kind of showed up again, right? So I made a couple of videos and put them out there, and here I am doing this. And actually, the Faithiest, I think that's how you say your name, Atheist. I made a video on him, kind of. So it's kind of cool. So it's good to be here and kind of discuss this with him and you guys.
I'm glad you're back, brother. It's nice to take vacations, kind of so to say, but it's nice to get back home too at the same time, you know. So we're glad you're back. I'm glad you're making videos again, and I'm glad you're with us tonight, brother. But yes, we do have Richard Suttles on with us, the Faithiest Atheist, who JD actually did. You released a video today answering one of Richard's questions that he posed to Dr. Leighton Flowers and Eric Hernandez, right? And so, Richard, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll kind of give a background. We do have a video clip from Capturing Christianity. Dr. Greg Koukl and Cameron was talking about a few different things, so I'll play that. But Richard, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to the listeners that don't know you, yeah, take it away.
Oh, hey, thanks. So I'm Richard Suttles. I go by the Faithiest Atheist. I do have a Facebook page, and I'm going to start a YouTube. I've got a YouTube page, but I just haven't started putting videos on it yet, but I'm going to start. The thing is, I work full-time in the counterterrorism world, so I really focus on radicalization and how people kind of go from thinking normally to where they become really, really radicalized. And radicalized isn't always bad. Sometimes it can be scary. But not always. When you're radicalized, you're thinking about something that's really, really important. And it's so important that you're willing to give up part of yourself to make that thing endure. And so far, not so bad. But some radicalized people become violent, and they're ready to do violence long beyond rationality. And so that's been my focus for the past 26 years now, both academically and career-wise. So I work in that world. I don't really have time to do like a full-time atheist ministry, if you call it that. But I do want to start putting up a few YouTube clips, because I think especially now we see so much polarization. I think I might be able to add a few clips on YouTube to help kind of explain what's going on with this polarization. And that's really, I'm going to keep using the word ministry. That's really what I'm about, less so than trying to disprove Christianity or trying to say atheism is the only way. I'm more about, why do people do this? Why do people say, hey, look, I'm going to give up part of my day or a whole bunch of my day to explain to people why I'm closer than they are to what's going on with reality? And again, so far, so good. But then why do people take it so far that they're really ready to start attacking and dehumanizing other people? And then what makes some people say, you know, I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be radical about self-respect and respecting others. You know, I'm going to be a zealot for peace. You know, what makes people do that? So that's really what I'm more about, more so than theism versus atheism. And then today, or just the other day, I wrote a question to Dr. Leighton Flowers, and they answered it. And I was really surprised to see that JD Martin had done a video on that question. So I felt famous. That was kind of my inspiration to start putting videos on my page.
Right on, man. Right on. We appreciate it.
It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, can I start off by asking first, because this is actually the first time that I've gotten to interact with you in this way, and so I kind of wanted to just feel around and see, maybe when you're talking about zeal and radicalism, you're attaching that directly to behavior or to ideology or to what exactly is it that you're thinking is the first part of radicalization? How's that kind of like step itself out, and why would that be? You said something about counterterrorism as your career.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. So are you working directly with the military, or are you just in some other capacity?
I started in the military and the Marines, and now I work for a government agency. And I don't mean to sound,
service.
Oh, thank you. And I don't mean to sound super secretive when I say government agency. It's just that if I say something, I don't want, and people know that I work for an agency. I don't want them to say, oh, well, this agency just declared this. And I'm low enough down.
We know you work for the CIA. We got it.
I will say this: if I worked for the CIA, I would have some great story about who I worked for that you wouldn't think CIA. So that usually with the CIA.
But by the way, thank you for your service. Yeah. I was also in the military, so.
Oh yeah, what service?
I was in the Army. In fact, well, we'll talk offline. Okay. I just may or may not work in a similar field.
Okay. Okay, good.
Well, thank you both. Go ahead, Richard.
I was going to say Joshua was in the middle of asking something.
Yeah.
I was saying specifically that the attachment of terrorism, that kind of implying in itself threat and violence. I think that's probably the connection to what you called radicalism. So I guess my question is this something that you consider to be like a psychological phenomena within people, or is this
So
something that's something maybe necessarily deeper or less than that? I'm kind of curious as to what exactly do you attach the radicalism to?
Okay, I will. After Tyler shows the video clip that kind of started this conversation, I'm going to get into why I think we have this zealotry wiring system, and I call it a wiring system because I think we have the psychology to where any person could become a zealot over something.
Okay.
And the reason why I always say something is that it could be a concept, it could be a person. So it could be like someone say, I'm going to be really loyal to this label, or they'll say, I'm going to be really loyal to this person, or I'm going to be really loyal to anti this person. So that, whatever this person does, I'm going to make sure that I can frame it as bad and evil, to kind of fight somebody who always tries to frame it as good. Or it could be a team name. So, and then the funny thing about a team name is that the team name can switch. So they can switch ideologies. So sometimes it's an ideology, but a team name could be about an ideology. And then over time, they become the opposite to that ideology. And people who are kind of in the middle just go along with it, even though they swore they were going to dedicate their lives to say pro X. Over time, they might be fiercely anti-X just because that's where the social norms went. That's where the groupthink went. So in that case, they're actually more loyal to the team name. And so they're zealots for the team name more so than the ideology, although they would probably swear it's the ideology. If you asked them why 10 years ago they loved this idea and now 10 years later they hate this idea, they would probably just get angry with it because their zealotry wiring system is kicked in, is ramped up so much that they don't think rationally about that anymore. They just think it must always be heralded and praised and worshipped and never scrutinized. So that level of zealotry is where you can start to really harm other people. And that's why I started all this is I want to try to catch people that are going that way. They could be theists, they could be atheists. There are so many atheists that are just as zany and want to get rid of people than any religious.
Fair enough.
Yeah, so it's just a human thing. It really, I'm going to pitch that it has nothing to do with religion, that it's just a biological, neurological system that we all have. And again, I'm an atheist, so I'm going to say this. I could be wrong. But in my view, religion is just one realm of that, not necessarily the explanation for that.
Well, what's interesting, and I really do want to go into that clip, but to me, if what you're saying is true, and everything you said, for the most part, I would agree with, that human beings have a tendency to become zealous and react consistently with our views and our passions and just even groupthink and all of that, right? To me, that religion would just be another thing that people attach themselves to. They can, for one person, it might be religion, another person, it might be sports, another person, it might be this. Those are just what people are attached to. The question, though, and I hope sometime after Tyler plays the clip, we can get into the discussion about, the validity of that.
Right.
It's, human behavior is one thing, but what is true? Are any of these religions true? And if they are true, then according to Christianity and according to God, you should be zealous for him. So to me, it's not the problem of being zealous or not. It's what are you zealous for? And more importantly, if that object that you're zealous for is worthy of your zeal and is true.
And how that manifests.
Yeah. I want to say I completely agree with what you just said. My whole ministry is that, okay, you're going to be zealous about something. Let's see what you're zealous about and see if you can't pick some metrics that are more helpful. Probably not just to yourself, but to other people. So I'm not anti-zealotry. I think we're all zealous. I just think sometimes we get caught up in something that makes us think in such a polarized fashion that we start to dehumanize other people. And that's where we can get into trouble. And that rate, any religion could be true. And another thing we're going to get into, and go ahead and get this right off the bat, is there is, a realm of truth that's true regardless of what human minds think. So some people say objective truth.
Amen.
Some people say ontological truth. So that truth exists. And I'm going to say a lot of things that make people go, oh, you're a relativist. It's not that. We'll all agree that there is some ontological truth out there. It's just that our zealotry wiring system can make different people with opposing worldviews truly and sincerely think that they've discovered it. And in their mind, so when you challenge what they're saying, okay, well, you're challenging ontological truth. So you're not confronting me because I represent the ontological truth. So there has to be some
just to clarify, and then Tyler, if we could play that clip, I think that'd be really helpful. Just to clarify, So you acknowledge that there is ontological truth, right? Does that, I mean, are you suggesting that it's impossible for people to know
No,
that they actually possess the ontological, or their beliefs are in accordance with the ontological reality?
well, another thing is we know that we're able to tap into ontological truth, or we wouldn't have air conditioning or satellites. The only way to get conditioning and
Fair enough.
satellites
Yes.
is that at some point we have been able to get to enough demonstrable scientific processes that we can have air conditioning and satellites. So we are
Right.
able to get to it. What I'll argue is that two people could fiercely believe opposing worldviews that aren't as easily transferable as how to build an air conditioner. And yet in their minds, it's the exact same thing. And they're going to each think, so, you know, say one Muslim and one Hindu, and they're both scholars and they're 80 years old. They're both going to say, my discovery has nothing to do with analysis anymore. I've discovered it. I can prove it to you just like 2 + 2 = 4, even though they can't.
But here's the question that I want to impress you on a little bit is, okay, so with natural sciences, right, that they either work or they don't work, and then the outcome is immediately apparent. But with with philosophy and with theology and afterlife and some of these things, we can't just necessarily just verify them, right? But does that mean that somehow that there's not truth about these things?
There is that truth. It's just that both of those individuals that I was just talking about are probably going to carry that certainty to their grave. And then outside of those two people carrying that truth to their that perceived truth to their grave, there's going to be another truth that's actually there. And maybe the Islamic scholar was closer to it. Maybe the Hindu scholar was closer to it.
Well, what if
Maybe
the Christian scholar that, you know, take these random people that I don't know and more use me as an example. What if the reality is actually that Jesus Christ was in fact the Son of God, and so forth and so on, right? So it almost sounds like you're suggesting that people can only get somehow close to the truth. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it almost the language you're using almost sounds like they were closer. But what about them actually being correct? Could the Christian possibly be correct?
I think it's more about the problem of being able to verify it somehow, isn't it?
Right. And so if let's just say that Christianity is absolutely true and you know, completely 100% true, and all, you know, especially the basic tenets of Christianity are true. In that case, the Christian scholar will have discovered the objective truth, the ontological truth, and he'll be certain. And meanwhile, there'll be, say, a Hindu scholar over here who's completely off, but they are equally as certain, and they can also provide what they perceive as really easy evidence to get to where they are. And if you point out where you think they're having a problem, they're going to think you have some moral or epistemic weakness that keeps you from seeing the truth. And in this scenario, we're saying Christianity is completely true. I'll explain why that Hindu scholar is probably going to continue, not necessarily, but might continue to carry that certainty all the way to the grave, because in his mind, it's as
but one thing is Robert, right? Is that right? Richard, sorry. One thing I will say though is I agree. I think what you're describing is the fact that people fundamentally are irrational, and they you know are so attached to their beliefs that they won't really scrutinize and believe things often for bad reasons. But one thing I will say is this sounds like almost like a hasty generalization, right? Because again, I'm hearing about these Hindu scholars, Christian scholars, but I'm just thinking about myself because I don't have access to everyone else's mind, right? And I agree with some generalizations. I think what you're saying is a generalization, but I don't think it necessarily applies to everyone, especially myself. So if you were to ask me, am I certain that Christianity is true? It depends on what you mean by certain. There is some epistemic humility to recognize that I could be wrong. And it's not as if that I'm not able to, you know, think about these things and think about the possible alternatives, right? So I'm just saying, and I don't think, Richard, I assume that it's what I noticed, and don't take this in as well. A lot of college students, they read Nietzsche, and they love Nietzsche. They all love Nietzsche, right? And they say, oh, there's this slave class, and there's the sheep, and everyone's a sheep, but me. I'm not the sheep. I am the enlightened one, right? And what's so interesting is that what I always want to tell those college students, no, you are the sheep. you yourself are the sheep, right? So oftentimes that, you know, we feel that we're the enlightened one and everyone else is just the people who are unable to scrutinize their views or so forth and so on. But the reality is this human phenomena is at work on all of us. And, you know, we all have this to a certain degree. So we all need to be able to examine our beliefs. And
exactly. That's exactly my point. In fact, I want to establish 3 things because since JD's just met me, and I can tell that he's eager to get into this kind of stuff. There's three things I want us to clarify, because I think if we don't clarify them, you'll come back and keep asking me, don't you understand this? So, and there's one guy named Tim Hull that I talked to, an unbelievable. I've been talking to him for 4 or 5 years, and he'll keep saying, are you denying that there's ontological truth? Are you saying that there's no way to reach ontological truth? And are you saying we should stop trying? And he's known me for 5 years, and we got to the point where I would make us write that down. There is an ontological truth. Sometimes it's discoverable more easily than not, and we should always keep trying, always. And sometimes I would type that out and say, I verify this, I confirm this, do you? And I would make him type out, yeah, I confirm this, and I would take a screenshot, so that if we're having a conversation over months and he's like, are you denying ontological truth? I would say, remember, because he's so quick to say, hey, don't forget there's ontological truth. I'm like, remember, that's our foundation. We start with that. So
yeah, let me ask you about those truths though. So you said
JD, real quick, if I can we go ahead and get into this clip, and then I would love to continue this conversation, because I think the clip will explain the foundation of where Richard's coming from. So let's go ahead and jump into that real quick, and then I would love to keep this conversation going. So here's the clip from Capturing Christianity with Dr. Greg Koukl and Cameron.
So characteristically, 99% of atheists, their morality is reduced of necessity by their worldview to some form of subjectivism. It's either going to be a Darwinian kind of characterization, or it's going to be a kind of a social contract thing. But that neither of those can give you any substantive, weighty morality by which you could say, yeah, I'm taking the high moral road. All you're doing is what your society agrees to do, if that's your explanation of morality. Or all you're doing is acting out what your genes demand of you. That's all. Why is that moral? So I'd be curious to hear their response. What is it? Well, we care about truth. Why? How does truth itself become virtuous, since there cannot be any virtue in atheism? Virtue is a moral quality, okay? And anyway, evolution doesn't choose for truth. It chooses for reproducibility, that's all, not for truth. And many have made this point, including C.S. Lewis and Alvin Plantinga and others like him. So I'd be curious what an atheist had to say about that. That'd be a good question for your listeners to ask to atheists. Well, why are you campaigning so aggressively? What motivates you? Now, they're going to give some answer, but I think that answer is going to be vulnerable to more questions, because I think the answer they give is not going to be able to make sense in a materialistic worldview. So it'd be interesting what that conversation will look like.
So with that being said, JD,
Let's
go
have
ahead.
that conversation then.
That conversation is happening right here. So go ahead, guys. I didn't mean to interrupt, but like I said, I did want to get that clip to lay the foundation of where we're coming from.
Well, here, more directly, let's just give some space real quick for Richard. How do you answer Greg's last question there? What do you think is the driving force? Is it just our neurology and inborn personality? You said it was more general than that. It's like not exclusive to any personality type. It's a human universal.
Yeah. Okay. I'll give like a quick spiel about these wiring systems that I'm talking about. And as I see it, we have three wiring systems in our brains, and they sometimes compete with each other. Sometimes they work together. Sometimes two work against one. Sometimes part of one works with part of the other two. But those three wiring systems are self-interest wiring, which means you're in it for yourself. You want to make sure you're doing okay. Not always a bad thing, but it's usually first. And then the second one is cooperation wiring, where you want to be cooperative to other people. And usually this is more like an altruistic form of cooperation, where you just see a person and you want to cooperate with that person, or some kind of biological species wants to cooperate with other biological species just naturally. So that's another wiring system that we have. And then the third one that I talked about first is the zealotry wiring. And the thing about zealotry that's different than cooperation is that you want to fiercely cooperate, but only with people who agree with you on your what you think is that sacred thing, this thing that you think is more important than yourself, and you even think that it's worth sacrificing part of yourself towards the endurance of that thing. Could be an ideology, could be a team name, could be a person, could be an idea, but that's where your zealotry wiring kicks in. And with people who agree with you, you feel like this transcendental connection where you're like, man, I love this person because they agree with me about this thing. And you really want to cooperate with them because they agree with you. If they don't agree with you, then you think less of them. You might not dehumanize them, but you might automatically think at least less than them. And then if somebody on your side violates the rules and they say, you know what, I like this stuff, but I'm not gonna follow the traditions. And, actually I kind of like this thing too. I'm just going to do them both. Then you get angry at them too, because you see that as some sort of objective violation. And then that can affect your emotions too. So in your zealotry wiring, you're fiercely cooperating, but under two conditions: that they agree with you on those standards, those sacred standards, and two, that they don't violate. And evolutionary wise, game theory wise, the reason why I think zealotry sometimes catches on is that one selfish person can destroy a whole village full of cooperators. If they have to cooperate, then one selfish person can just go in and just keep taking advantage of them. And they've got to keep cooperating with them because they're cooperators, and he's selfish, so he can destroy them all. But a village of zealots, if he walks into that village of zealots, they'll probably kill him as soon as he gets there.
Well,
unless
Richard,
he catches on. Well, hold on, this is actually the end of it. So a group of fierce zealots can often outcompete self-interest and cooperation, and they can really dominate a landscape. And it's not morally great. It's not I'm not saying let's do that. I'm just saying biologically that's what can happen. And so that's what I mean by the zealotry wiring.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay. So the three categories, real quick, the recap of the three categories was self-interest, cooperation, and zealotry. That was the three. The three you said wirings or
I call it a wiring system because your brain, our brains are always rewiring itself. When you learn how to read, your brain rewires itself. When you learn a new topic, your brain rewires. So our brains are always doing that. If you know anybody who believes something that's just kind of way off the wall now, it's because they're fascinated with it so much that their brain just kind of only deals in that now. That's I call it a wiring system. Your brain is just thinking this is normal, and it just kind of keeps pushing that. And so someone, and because I say we have all three of these systems, some people can be a zealot for looking at other people as having human value, saying no matter what you believe, you're human and you have value. They can see respectability towards others as a thing of zealotry. So you can have zealotry for multiple things. So maybe human value, my religion, my sports team, my kids, whatever. You can have them all in this realm where you think this is really, really important, and I'm going to dedicate a part of myself towards the endurance of these things. It doesn't have to just be one thing. And I'm going to argue the more things you can fit into your zealotry wiring, maybe the less likely you'll be towards polarizing towards other people.
Oh, okay. So the problem really is almost attached to isolating one good over all other goods and not a full integration of good as a generalized topic, because you're saying zealotry is not inherently bad. It can become, let's say, inflamed.
Yeah.
Almost
absolutely.
like a sickness where you because it's what you're describing to me sounds a lot like the Piagetian model of playable and non-playable games gone to a wrong extreme, right? Where the guy who has a non-playable game needs to enforce it on you in order to, because I think I understand what you're saying. Okay. Sorry, JD, I didn't mean to cut you off there. You had a question for him, right?
Yeah. Sorry about that. Trying to fix some audio problems. Am I coming in clean or no?
Much better.
Yeah, you sound good to me right now. Yeah.
I am coming in clean.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
You got rid of
Anyways,
the static problem.
If I do, let me know. Okay, Richard, here's my question for you. Are you a naturalistic determinist?
Well, okay. My thing about naturalism is I don't think we know everything that there is to know about naturalism yet. I think there might be just tons of more stuff than what we know that could be going on in nature.
Well, sure. Yeah.
And then there's so many complex things that even if you were to back up the universe to the way it was right before the Big Bang, and start it back over, I don't think that everything would end up exactly the way it is now. I think there's so many different things that could randomly go different ways. Like with our DNA, sometimes DNA just makes a random choice. And if you were to rewind time, it might make another random choice. So I don't know that we could ever get to the point where if we knew all the facts, all the factors of all the complex stuff of naturalism, that we could necessarily always predict what was going to happen next. There's so many, there seems to be so much randomness, and I'm open to the idea that there's just so much more to know. So that I say, I don't think it's the mind of an external deity that's controlling some of the things that theists claim. I suspect it might be a different kind of explanation, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was more natural, but we just don't know what it is. And it's like Greg Koukl says, our answers are going to be vulnerable to more questions, and I completely embrace that. He's absolutely right. I'm not going to say anything today that's going to make any theist give up their religion and say, you know what, he's right. Never mind. Nobody's going to do that tonight. That's not what I'm about. I think there's a lot of vulnerabilities and gaps in what I'm going to have to say. I do think it better explains reality, but like I said before, we're all, once you're on this path of trying to figure out what's right, you're going to think you have it figured out. So I could be just as much of a victim as that as anybody.
Well, I actually appreciate that humility and the attitude that you're approaching this with. But I can say that I share JD's approach to asking this kind of direct course of questions. But I'm kind of I feel really sympathetic to what you're describing here, because and especially with Tyler and I met each other quite a few years ago. And when we did, we happened to be in a very unique relational circumstance, because he doesn't live in the same state as me. I met this guy on Facebook. He messaged me randomly, had some sort of family trouble, and he called me on Facebook Messenger while I was at a church service. And I walked outside of the church service to answer the phone for, at the time, a stranger. And he asked me a couple of questions that just seemed really very, very, for me, poignant and on topic, because I constantly am thinking about these things, but coming from a stranger, seemingly really random, right?
Yeah.
And yet, come to find out, as we began to be really good friends and become very vulnerable to one another and trust each other with our innermost person, and just be really vulnerably honest with one another. One of the things that came out is that we had some pretty drastic disagreements in our worldview. And yet, even though some of the people that we talked to, who, let's say, agree with Tyler, were very cutting and mean to me, right? Where Tyler was not, right? And then people who would agree with me were cutting and mean to Tyler, where I was not. And it's not necessarily just a personality type, because both of us have dominant personalities, and both of us are good at quarreling, let's say, and both of us have a real eagerness to find truth, and to know and to understand truth, and believe that it is a thing to know and understand truth, and pursue it with all of our hearts. And in some sense, I think the thing that both of us are zealous about is that pursuit of truth. That's the umbrella we're under. And so our disagreement is actually buffered by our seeking, something like that. And I think that's kind of the relationship that got fostered there. And what you're describing is actually the same thing, is buffering a relationship where, even though we have our passionate pursuits, we're not aiming them like clubs at one another, right? Am I still following?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly the kind of thing I want to preach. I'll be using evangelical terms like ministry and preach, but that's exactly the kind of things that I like.
I'll try not to be triggered by that.
I'll do that. I was born and raised Southern Baptist, so I think like a Southern Baptist, even though I'm an atheist. So I'll still say,
fair enough. Okay, Tyler and I we're both Baptist too. So yeah.
So I want to go back. Tyler, my audio is so messed up. Let me know. But I want to go back to something you said, Richard. So, you deny being a naturalistic determinist, but you are a naturalist, right? You believe that there is no supernatural reality, hence you're a naturalist. So there is no supernatural. There is no soul. There is no God. There is no spirits. There's no demons. There's none of that, right? So the only thing we have.
I would say if there is a deity, I would probably shrug and say, okay, now there is. And so I was wrong about that. So I'm not so closed off to it that it would change my life, other than to start paying more attention to what the deity wants.
So
Well, would
you
you
actually
affirm
don't.
oh, sorry,
You
I'm
actually
sorry. Go
don't
ahead.
know
I don't know.
if you don't know if the world is only naturalistic. So there could in fact be spiritual realities, even something as simple as you having a soul. It is
Right.
possible that you have
It
a soul.
does. It could be. I suspect there isn't, but I'm not the kind of guy to walk around screaming at people who believe in it, because
Okay.
it could be.
Okay, so here's the dilemma I see. Okay,
Okay.
so it seems to be, and it seems to be, if under your worldview, that it's more likely than not that the natural world is the only thing that exists, and everything under the natural world operates by law of cause and effect, right? Things don't. When
Yeah.
you shake up, if I shake up this can, the
Uh-huh.
soda's going to jump out of here, and it's not choosing to do that. It just happens because of cause and effect. It has no choice in the matter, and so if everything in all of us is just a bunch of naturalistic effects, then it seems to be that is why the vast majority of atheists are naturalistic determinists. Now, it sounds like the way that what you've done to escape this is to deposit randomness and to say, oh, I think you might even trying to appeal to quantum physics and just pure randomness. But here's the problem in my mind. Okay, so let's just say that there is an indeterministic reality where there's actually pure randomness, right? Well, to me, that's even more problematic because either it's for personhood and morality. So either we are deterministically, robots essentially, or we're just random. The things that we do are purely just random things, right? That just there's no real reason that I move my left arm or this thing or that thing happened. It just is a fact of randomness in the universe. And what I'm trying to say is either it seems like you have two dilemmas here for morality. This is why I don't know what your view on morality, so maybe we need to talk about that.
Yes.
But it seems like your worldview runs into two major problems. Either you're a naturalistic determinist, and that seems to destroy morality and destroy true personhood, or you have this randomness factor, which also seems to destroy personhood and morality. So I'm just curious of how you would respond to that.
Okay. Yeah. Actually, we could probably have a really, really long conversation just on morality. But I do want to talk about morality and epistemology, because as I see it, those are the two platforms of zealotry. Once you're in a really, really deep zealous journey, and again, that doesn't have to be bad, because I will say that I would say a lot of people in this day and age aren't in the zealotry journey, other than to say, keep me out of it. Don't talk to
Right.
me about the things that just keep me out of it. Let me just take care of my own stuff.
Zealous
once
about
you-
their indifference, right?
Right. But it's still a zealous stance, because they're saying that the epistemic and moral standard is to not deal with it. So they're still making a
Right.
claim. But then there's people like you and me, and this was my answer to Greg Koukl. I keep saying Koukl. Koukl. The people like us are on this journey, this zealous journey, and our two big things are what's epistemically true and what's morally true. Those are our two standards. And when you do this long enough, when you do it for as many years as we've all done it, they kind of go together. This morality and epistemology all forms together, so that you start telling people you have an epistemic duty to do what's good, and you have a moral duty to understand what's true. And it's all together. It's all one big tapestry.
Right.
And so
What did
my
you
thing
say
is
that
that
I'm sorry. Did
hold
you
on.
say we have a duty, an epistemic and moral duty?
Yeah, when you're on this zealotry path, you're looking for that epistemic truth and that moral duty. They become this tapestry of where you definitely think there's a obligation. You think there's a should and a ought
Okay.
on the epistemic level and moral level, and it all works together. And you definitely think that's, and you're like, I'm not doing analysis anymore. I've discovered it. And so once you're on this journey, you have that perception that you've figured that out, and we all have that. And like we said before, some of us are going to be closer to the truth than the others.
Do we wait, Richard? Do we have to think that we figure things out to start living in correspondence to those things? So it's
Well,
like, for example, it sounds like you are actually agnostic. So it sounds like you don't think that you figured it all out, and yet it sounds like the very fact that you're called the Faithiest Atheist and on this show doing your ministry and everything else sounds like you actually are living consistent with that, but you don't think you figured it out. So
Well, I
does that,
don't
is
think
that
I figured out
required?
every answer. And something Tyler and I were talking about last week is that with every worldview, there's going to be some gaps, some things that you can't point to
Mhm.
and demonstrate as easily as 2 + 2 = 4. But we think that we have enough figured out that we're ready to run tell that. We're ready to preach. And we're ready to say, look, I've got enough figured out that you should listen to what I have to say. And that could go for atheists, theists, sports fans,
Okay.
people in love with their country. But you're in this moral and epistemic tapestry of shoulds and oughts that might be true. You know, given the law of non-contradictions, we can't all be correct, but we all perceive it as if we are correct, and we think that the other people are missing something. They've done something wrong to get there. So the thing,
Tyler, you
caveat,
look like you're going to say something.
yeah,
No,
well,
I'm just letting Richard finish his thought. Yeah, I don't want to jump in real quick. Go
yeah.
ahead.
The caveat I want to say here is that there is actually a truth. You know, here we are with our tapestries. Outside of that, there is going to be some truth about deities and whether there's a standard for morality outside of us or whatever. That exists. But all of us who are on this journey might think we have it, and we're not open to considering the fact that we haven't got it.
So when you just said whether there is a objective morality or something of that sort, so are you agnostic on whether or not morality is objective? Because that was really the question I was asking about determinism, randomness, how that relates to morality, and I was assuming that you affirmed objective morality. So do you recognize that your worldview doesn't give you any grounds, or where are you at when it comes to objective morality?
Okay, so and this is another thing where I just don't know how we would demonstrate it. If it does exist, and you know, sometimes with other people that I've had this conversation with, sometimes I'll imagine that there's two aliens from another dimension who know the answer. They know whether there is or not, and they're just watching us. Something they would say is that all of these people feel like once they're on this zealotry journey, they feel like it is, and it drives them and it moves them, and it means a lot to them. And if there isn't one, then the aliens would say these guys are fooling themselves. And if there is one, these aliens would say, so some of these guys, they all know that there is, but some of these guys have it right and some don't, or they all have it wrong, but they all perceive it because it is there. So those aliens would know for sure. They could show it to each other. They could say, here it is.
But there's a difference between lack of being able to demonstrate something and believing in something. For example, I don't think you can demonstrate that you're not in the Matrix. I don't think you can demonstrate you're not a brain in a vat. However, something suggests to me you don't believe that. You believe that you're in fact in the objective world and that you're not such a thing. So there's a big difference between knowing something and believing something, and whether something, the fact that you cannot demonstrate objective morality, which I can debate, is not really the question I asked. I'm saying, do you believe that objective morality is true, or based on your worldview, do you admit that you cannot ground it, and so your worldview causes you to be either agnostic or flat out deny that objective morality exists?
So one thing I can see already, because there's like 7 things that you've mentioned that I really need to talk about and bring up to make sure that what I'm saying makes sense. I can see right now that you and I probably just need to have another conversation where we just go over and over all the different things that I'm talking about, because my message really here today is to explain why I think that atheists will have that passion to answer Greg Koukl, and why they would be immediately turned off for him to say that it must logically lead to nihilism if they don't believe that there's an external source of morality outside of the human mind. And like right now, Greg Koukl will say, well, in that case, they have to be nihilists. They just haven't realized yet.
I agree with that. We can talk about that. We can leave the morality conversation. We can talk straight about whether atheism leads to nihilism. We can do that if you want. I totally, you don't need Greg Koukl. I'm here. And I definitely believe that, in fact, that atheism.
I'm pretty sure what he means is he's not really trying to necessarily debate. I think he's trying to just articulate the thing that could be drawn out, like, let's say the lesson, not the answer, something like that, right?
Right. And here's another thing about, and you keep bringing up things that I've got to make sure I explain to people. Just because you can't demonstrate something, that doesn't mean you're not allowed to believe it. There's 2 people that I know that have talked about this. One is Stephen Meyer and the return of the God hypothesis. And then another one is a guy named Michael. I pulled this book because this one's important. I don't know if it shows up backwards on your book.
Knowledge Machine.
But the Knowledge Machine. So both of these guys have talked about why all of a sudden did science emerge? You know, why in the Reformation were we suddenly, after hundreds of thousands of years of humans existing, why did we suddenly get into science? And Stephen Meyer says it was because all the scientists believed that it was they were discovering attributes of God, of a single creator, and so they were passionate about trying to learn more about that God. So they stuck to the scientific method because they believed that it was describing their creator. So for them, this was another way to learn about God. Michael Strevin for the Knowledge Machine had a different view. He said that they were absolutely committed to being able to demonstrate whatever it is. You can't take another step until you can demonstrate it, which they put each other in this at odds, where they had to find a way to demonstrate things. So at that point, they had to come up with telescopes and microscopes, and they had to build things in order to demonstrate, because the other guys wouldn't listen to them unless you could demonstrate it. And so I think that both of those guys are probably true. I think all of those scientists who are arguing about being able to demonstrate, I think they were all theists and probably majority Christians. So they did believe that they were discovering God. So there was that passion. But because they were so zealous about it, they weren't willing to listen to other people bring in their opinion unless they could demonstrate it. So they had to demonstrate it. And I think that's where the scientific revolution came in. And then the final thing I want to point about this is that the author of The Knowledge Machine says, if you live your whole life like that, it's irrational. To try and make it so that you won't take a step unless you can demonstrate it, it's unhelpful, it's irrational, it's unreasonable. So I don't think that you absolutely have to demonstrate it, but I do think that two things about demonstrations. One is it closes at least it closes the issue. If I'm arguing that 2 apples and 2 apples equals 4 apples, and we bring out 4 apples, then at some point I'm going to say, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, I was wrong. So that it helps to be able to demonstrate it, but it's not necessarily, it can't be the only way to live. So by all means, believe things that you can't demonstrate, but also admit it. So I can demonstrate this, I can't demonstrate this, and this is a gigantic leap of faith. Atheists have that too. That's why I'm the Faithiest Atheist. We have leaps of faith too.
I think though, Richard, I think that there's something in between that, right? There's something in between. I can demonstrate this, and this is a giant leap of faith.
There is.
I simply believe this. I think there's explanatory value and consistency. So that's where
There is.
the worldview analysis. So, for example, morality. There seems to be this natural recognition that raping and torturing babies, or cutting off women's noses, or going around and mass murdering people is objectively evil. Right? I mean, when 9/11 happened, all atheists talked about how evil this was to do these kind of things. So there seems to be this objective reality that we all perceive, just like we perceive we're not brains in a vat or in the Matrix. We perceive that there is such thing as morality, and often it goes against us. We don't even want it. We try to repress it. We try to say, stop telling me that this is wrong when I really want to do it, and yet it keeps that nagging feeling that I'm objectively wrong, and that I'll be judged for that continues to be there. So the thing is, what we have to ask, just like any other phenomenon, is what worldview or what set of data best explain this? And it seems to me, and that's how we come to all kinds of beliefs, right? For example, why am I not a brain in a vat? Why is the deity of deception not simply tricking me into believing all these things? Well, that is not the best explanation of the phenomena of me perceiving that I'm talking to 3 gentlemen in this conversation right now.
Right.
And so I'm just pointing out that there's this other way that we come to belief besides demonstration. It's called explanatory value. What worldview or what explanation best explains the phenomena we have here?
Right. And this is why I say to always keep struggling, because like you, I don't think that it has to be demonstration or a leap of faith, but I do think those are the 2 ends of the spectrum. The thing where you can just show it and then it's over. And then the thing where you say, well, I don't know, but I believe it. And then in between that is all of our philosophy and modal arguments and things like that. And people lay it out the best they can. So I absolutely do agree with that.
So just
go ahead.
Yeah, just to be clear on one thing. So everyone would agree that we can know things that are not demonstratable,
or at least recreatable.
First of all, yes, but second of all, we could be wrong about some of those things that we know and can't believe. But if we can survive knowing that and thinking that, then natural selection will say, well, okay. Because the thing about natural selection, and again, I'm becoming this from an evolution point of view, natural selection is just checks in to see who's still here. And if you're still here, the natural selection is like, okay, good, you're still here. Even if you don't believe something that's true. To talk about our moral perceptions, when I was saying that you're going on this zealous journey and you have this moral and epistemic tapestry, with that comes these intuitive perceptions of absolute right and wrong and correct and incorrect. So epistemology and moral intuitions are seriously compelling us to think, don't even look into this. This isn't analysis. You're receiving this. You didn't study this and then find out about it. This just hits you. Somebody tells you something horrible. This person did this horrible thing. You should immediately recoil. And then when that person recoils, you're like, hey, where did that come from? Where did that disgust that you just suddenly felt? Where did that come from?
Wait, I'm so confused. You're saying that, so when I hear about, or when I view, this happened to me when I was 15 years old, I watched a man beat a woman in front of her. Are you suggesting that I rationalistically thought I should be horrified by this, and that
No.
resulted in me feeling horrified?
No, he's
about it?
saying that afterward you can question the source of that reaction.
Oh, okay.
Why would you react that way to that stimuli, and why should it be a moral
Is that what you're
reaction
saying, Richard?
versus?
Yeah, actually, I was saying the opposite of what you said. I was
okay.
some things we don't actually analyze it. It hits us.
Okay, yeah.
Something that I never thought of, or something I never thought I'd see, and it hits me, and I recoil, and I'm like, oh my God, what was that?
Yeah.
And then a theist could say, where did that come from? Why did that suddenly happen? And I can see why someone would say, well, it must be based on something external to the mind, or external to us that we're realizing, rather than something that's biologically or neurologically happening in our brain.
Yeah, that wouldn't be my argument. My argument would be, what is that? Like, my argument is, when you hear stories about young girls being molested, and you have moral repulsion to that, what is that? Is that in fact merely an opinion? Is that a lack of taste? Is that just simply an evolutionary mechanism, like picking your nose or defecating? What is this? Is this really wrong or not? Right? And to me, and that's really, you wanted to go into nihilism. There's so many things that I'm still trying to figure out. Do you actually believe that it is objectively immoral to do certain things? Or are you agnostic about that? I don't know if you, or do you want to talk about nihilism? Like, we're kind of,
I think
we're
what
so
he's just
broad.
talking.
We're going so broad here that we're not like dialing to really anything in particular.
Well, I think you're at the stage, JD. I think you're in a completely different realm of why we started this talk today. Although you're asking things that need to be answered. I just don't know that.
Right.
I wasn't ready for it, and so it's kind of cool to kind of test me to see what I can bring up off the top of my mind. And so it's really, really important what you're bringing up. But for the bottom line about what I was trying to get across to Greg Koukl, and then I was thinking we'd start there and work backwards. But to quickly try to answer what you just said, if we have this epistemic and moral tapestry of where we think there are oughts and shoulds, we have this intuition and stuff that kind of hits us. I think we're born with some of that. And some of those are more universal. So like if you, like for instance, I study ISIS, the terrorist group ISIS.
Yeah.
And even ISIS would think it was disgusting to torture newborn babies, because ISIS is like, well, they're just newborn babies. They haven't learned yet. And then they would say, unless you're trying to make a point, or unless they're doomed for something else, unless there's some larger thing that needs to happen, then we would just have to overcome our disgust for the, killing babies for this other good. But even they are generally like, oh my God, torturing babies, why would you do that? So there is some universal things that I think we all inherit, but I think, we inherit a sweetness for sugar, or bitterness for salt. That doesn't necessarily mean there's something external to the human brain that makes, that makes us do that.
Okay. So it sounds like you're biting the bullet, but so and again, I'm not, so maybe you can help me out, because I don't want to press you in areas that you don't want to be pressed. Okay. Or anything like that.
And I normally love it, but today we weren't.
No, that's fine. I want to respect where you want to go. So if you could just succinctly tell me where you want to go, so I can make sure I understand where you want to go, right?
Okay.
Because when I was explaining what we were going to talk about, and it looks like we're almost running out of time here, but when I was explaining what we're talking about, I saw the Greg Koukl quotation, and it sounded like Greg Koukl's real question for the atheist, right, was simply, what are you doing?
Right.
Why are you so passionate about convincing atoms in motion that have no ultimate meaning, that are going to dust and will cease to exist? Why bother? Why not just let me?
That's exactly why we started this.
Why not just let me be deceived? I'm not hurting anybody, right? In fact, I'm helping people. I'm a much better person because of Christianity. Why not just leave me alone? Right? I'm teasing you, but seriously, why is it, and maybe not you particular, but why is this overriding passion of atheists to destroy the faith of believers? For what reason?
I agree. And that's part of my ministry is that, I end up arguing with atheists like the kind you're describing. I'll argue with them even more than theists. In fact, I usually like doing shows with Christians like this more than I do with atheists, because there are so many who are like, we just need to get rid of it. We need to stop placating them. We need to teach them how reason and logic work. And I can't really spread my message to them either. In fact, they'll say, you know what, you're secretly religious and you don't know it, because I'm not appropriately condemning theists. So yeah, and there's some good atheists, but there's not too many popular. Like I couldn't have 5 minutes with Matt Dillahunty. Matt Dillahunty would hang up on me.
Yeah,
Because
he's not on that level, bro.
yeah,
Richard.
so yeah, I'm with you that I don't think atheists should do what you're saying, but I do want to explain why they're doing it. Like I understand why ISIS is doing what they're doing, but I'll never sign up with ISIS. I do understand how their moral and epistemic tapestry works, because I read their crap all the time. And I understand why atheists do what they do, even the atheists who want to eliminate religion, and they feel like there's this subjective morality that has to do with the well-being of the world, and that that well-being is different than our individual opinions, and so they call that as objective morality, and that's what their standard is.
Subjective, objective morality.
Right, like Sam Harris.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, well, I meant to say just objective morality. This is what they view as. I see what you're saying. If it's they view it's the subjective, but if they believe it's subjective, then to them it's objective. And that's
so strange.
Well, I think
that's
the
one
thing that for a second here, because I've actually spent a lot of time in that kind of realm of the debate, because I love philosophy, but I also love psychology very deeply. And one of the things that I listened to was several talks by Sam Harris about his understanding of morality, and he tries to, give let's say a reason why objective morality can be a thing without a religious quote, theistically religious worldview. And he ultimately says that the goal by which we perform might be subjective, but the means to achieve that goal, once it's been decided, can be objective. And so he thinks that whatever's at the top of the value hierarchy might be arbitrary, but once it's there is an objective way to achieve such a thing.
But honestly, to me, that is just semantic word games. That's like
I agree with you. That's the thing, JD. I think I agree with you, but I think instead of focusing necessarily on the philosophy or the worldview of the thing, what he's pointing out is the phenomena occurs, and the reason he thinks it occurs is actually a human universal.
Right.
Well, yeah.
I think we're born with this human universal to build this zealotry wiring with epistemic and moral platforms. I think we tend to believe that we have it figured out. I think we tend to get angry, or at least we get threatened to feel angry if people challenge us, which could lead to more dehumanization and polarization. And then there's people who've learned to deal with it, and they've brought in more stuff into their zealotry wiring, where they've decided to treat people nicely and to live more organized lives. And that's the thing that I'm pushing. Some things I don't know that we can answer.
One thing I hear though that does pique my interest. And how long are we going, guys?
We can honestly go for however long. I don't have a constraint on this one.
I'm good too.
Okay. I'll probably, you guys can continue. I'll jet out eventually. But anyways, one thing I find disturbing is oftentimes I think we fail to really understand the worldview and the mentality of another group, and we just label them as fanatics and crazies and psychos and deranged people who are mentally disabled or whatever, and don't realize that no, they're actually being very consistent with their nature and their worldview. So, for example, ISIS. I don't believe in for 1 second. I'm sure there are some opportunists in ISIS, right? I'm sure there are some individuals who just want to rape the girl down the street and then join ISIS to do that. I'm sure that happens. That happens to every single group. That happened even in the Maccabean period, where the Jewish Maccabeans were fighting against tyranny, right? And even said that the hypocrites had joined them. So that's always going to have opportunists. But to me, ISIS is really just being consistent with their worldview and what Islam is really trying to accomplish. In fact, what's really going on is that your friendly Muslim down the street or whatever either is extremely secular or is just disobedient or just completely ignorant of what Islam truly entails, right? So it's not that your friendly neighbor down the street who barely is Muslim at all is a true Muslim. No, that person is actually equivalent to a liberal Christian who is just basically Christian in name only. That these people that are most serious about Islam are this way.
Right.
So I'm just curious of your thoughts on that, about just people, consistency and the consequences of worldview versus just this, maybe people are sick in the head because only sick people in the head would ever do bad things.
Right. So like the difference between a good zealousness or a zealousness that can lead to good versus a zealousness that can lead to evil. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's one thing I want to point out right now too. And we haven't even gotten into, when I talk about this tapestry that we all come up with, when that happens at the group level, the natural selection really pays attention, because if some person has a worldview that's really, really close to the ontological truth, encounters a group of 50 people who have a worldview that's really, really way off of the ontological truth, and those 50 people kill that one guy, he was actually closer morally and epistemically to the ontological truth. Let's say that's the thing.
Yeah.
And they just killed him. And natural selection will look and say, well, who's still here? Those 50 people? Good to go. So evolution is not something to praise, from my view. It's just, if that's what's going on, and I believe that's what's going on, then it's just something to know that natural selection wouldn't care if ISIS suddenly, got to where they had 200 million people and they were wiping out people left and right, and they were celebrating. I don't know that natural selection would reach in and favor one side. They would just keep.
What's interesting? I'm so fascinated by what you're saying, because I've heard this before, and I find it so interesting. And I'm not sure exactly what you meant. You sound like you're saying one thing, and then you said something else, like, oh, maybe he's saying something different. But I often hear evolutionists speak of natural selection as if it's a deity in control of things.
I'm glad you brought that up.
As if it exists to care at all. Yeah. Natural selection is merely you were able to deposit sperm in this. Right. This other person wasn't, and they died. Right? That's it has no thoughts. It has no direction. It has no telos. There is no goal for natural selection. It doesn't exist. It's just a phenomenon that says if you die, you can't reproduce, and your genes disappear. That's all, right? So of course it's not thinking like, oh, this guy has the truth, let's preserve him. It's not alive to be thinking about anything, right?
You and I are bringing up things that I've got theist friends that I've had conversations with for 15 or 20 years, and you and I are touching like the peaks of all those conversations in the space of a couple hours. Man, I wish I had known you were coming. I would have said, we need 4 or 5 hours to talk about this.
Well, my friend, you have an invitation. Guys, I have to go. I had to do. I was about to say real ministry. This is real ministry. Somebody's letting me know I have to minister to them on my phone. I have to do a phone call here. But I will say that you have an invitation to Faithiest Atheist to come on my channel and have a discussion with me. I usually don't talk to atheists, to be completely honest.
Well, I'll be a completely different type of atheist. I won't.
No, you already have shown yourself to be a completely different type of atheist. So
Amen.
You have an invitation on the channel, and I would love to talk to you, and we can hone in on whatever you want to talk about, right?
Sounds
so we'll figure it out. But thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Joshua.
Thanks for hanging out, JD. We appreciate it, man.
And continue to love on this brother. Thank you, Richard. God bless, brothers.
Thank you.
See ya. Right on.
Real quick about what he said about natural selection. He's absolutely right. And even Charles Darwin brought this up. He and other evolutionists hated him for doing it. He said, I'm going to talk about evolution. I'm going to talk about natural selection as if it's a decider, and it's not. I'm going to talk about it like it's a person, like it's a mind, and it's not. But he says it helps to explain it by saying it that way. So I was doing that too. And, there's so many caveats and platforms that I have to establish with people that I've had these conversations with for, over a decade. And as I was talking to him, I was like, man, he's going to hit each one of these because he's good at it. But yeah, it was hard to catch them all so that he wouldn't have to ask it. So I kind of had to push forward as much as I could until he asked it. Then I would go back and say, you're absolutely right about natural selection, not actually selecting. You're absolutely right that there's a perception of moral objectivity, and people act as if that's the truth, even if they say it's not. People who say that it isn't will say that it's, absolutely mandatory that you understand that it's not, which itself is a moral claim. So he's absolutely right in these things. So I appreciate having that challenge, but I don't know that I was ready to answer all of those questions.
Well, JD's a sharp dude, and he's good
Very.
for the pushback. I've had some conversations where JD put the grill on me too, so I understand. But you took that really well, and I appreciate that you are you're really well mannered. Like so
Thanks.
good on you, man. But
Yeah.
I appreciate also the fact that what you're talking about is more the description
Right.
of the phenomena rather
Yes.
than your explanation of your worldview being the
Right.
best explanation of the phenomena. The phenomena
Right.
is we're all zealots toward
Well,
something. And the
right.
Christianese language for this, let's say, is
Mhm.
you're always going to worship something. You don't get to choose to worship. You choose what you worship.
Right.
Right. And so it sounds like you're describing a similar problem that we're describing, but you're
Yes.
seeing it and describing it using different languages all. And
Right.
I think maybe it's because I've gotten used to not speaking what I call Christianese
Yeah.
because of the place where I work. A lot of the people when they arrive are just not Christians, let's say.
Right.
And so I have to kind of, identify with them. And the scripture says, be all things to all people and meet them where they are, but be kind enough not to leave them there,
Right.
And so I think what you're doing is in a really noble sense, the same thing. And I
Yes.
think JD was just trying to kind of stick a crowbar under it and see what the motive was,
Yes.
and something approximating that. But I think the way that you describe, and especially because of the way that you just talked about natural selection and Darwin's confession that it's not a deity, but I'm going to talk about it as though it's a conscious persona that makes
Yes.
decisions.
Mhm.
For me, because and Tyler knows, I have a way of viewing the world that corresponds to, let's say, storytelling. I call it a narrative structure or a narrative lens of looking at things. And I don't think that we can look at things that happen in a sequential order without telling a story, because there's just too many
Yes.
facts of reality. We need to integrate them into something like a narrative, or we simply
Yes.
won't understand them. And so when
Absolutely
you're
agree with
talking
that.
about the progression of somebody going from, let's say, self-interest to inner community and communication or cooperation, I believe was the language that you used, and then going from there into a category of zealousness, whatever happens to land at the top of that hierarchy of value, if it's isolated enough from everything else in the hierarchy, and that hierarchy gets steep enough that that thing is seriously elevated above everything, it will
Right.
naturally produce, like you said, a zealousness. So I'm totally tracking with what you're saying here. I
Yeah.
agree with you, because I would say, for me personally, because I appreciate the language you're using to describe this stuff. For me, it's really clarifying, because I do agree with you that people get zealous about things. That's inevitable. It doesn't matter what personality type you came from, where you were born, or what kind of parents you have. In some sense, there's going to be a zealousness about you. Some people are zealous about not fighting other people, and so they became non-combative. That happens
Yes.
to be part of passivity and being an agreeable person. It's attached to
Yep.
a personality, but it doesn't exclude you from being zealous about something. So I totally
Exactly
agree
right.
with you. And I think that's mostly because of the way that we interact with the world as persons, is
Yes.
really like we're not interacting with material compositions of things. That's just not,
Right.
it's not what we're doing right now. I'm not talking to a clump of cells. I'm not even just talking to a face. I'm talking to a person that inhabits
Right.
the thing, right? There's something very mysterious about this. And so and like you said, it's very difficult to think about what it would mean to say I can demonstrate or not demonstrate a claim. It's like falsifiability is a big deal. So I really think that I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And I correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like I'm tracking with what you're explaining so far.
Yeah, you are absolutely. In fact, I was going to add something that I think this explains why William Lane Craig and James White will go to their graves, each thinking that the other one has missed something, that they prioritize something. They both assume they're going to be and go into heaven, and they're not concerned about each other's souls, but they each think that the other one is missing something intellectually, or something is tying them up that they haven't caught, and they're each absolutely positive that they've put in all the work, and they have each put all the work. So they've become zealots, although they're both Christians, although they would each of them would drop everything and run to the other one's house if the other one's house was on fire. They're going to live great lives and take care of their families and grandkids and great grandkids and be inspirational to a lot of people, and probably go to their grave thinking that the other one was wrong about either predestination or Molinism. not to say they won't change their mind, but they've both put in so much work that they're probably just going to be zealots on different sides of that coin, but at the same time, still have that sense of unity and cooperation with each other, at least under the banner of Christianity or just human being. Neither one will ever become an atheist, but if one did, the other one wouldn't turn his back on him. He'd still be there for the other one. So I just wanted to say that, just being a zealot doesn't make you, take you away from towards or away from religion. It's just that series of epistemic and moral standards. I will say that a Calvinist is absolutely convinced that you can't, or a predeterminist is absolutely convinced that you can't be able to choose something that God doesn't know you're going to choose, and they don't think there's any way around it. And I realize modalists think there is a way around it. And a modalist is thinking you can't take away God's sovereignty or our free will. And so they're thinking those two have to work together, and maybe they do, but that's their pinnacle. That's like, you can't assail this. This is unassailable. And so that's probably why Calvinists and modalists, many of whom, especially the ones that put in the work, probably won't change their minds. But you can at least say, I still love this person, to the end of the earth, and we'll just keep arguing about that one thing, but otherwise we love each other. So that's just another example of how zealotry can really take hold and not really be dangerous, but it can just affect your certainty to such a degree that you probably won't ever change it. And again, not to say it never happens, but it just makes it really difficult.
Right. And I still agree. And it's funny because you're using Christian categories to explain these things. I really appreciate that you know what you're talking about. But the way that kind of plays itself out ultimately, because like I said, I've had a real liking and let's say a zealotry toward learning about psychological personality models and behavioral models and just different kinds of things. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about belief. Being a religious person, let's say, I've come to recognize that what you're describing fundamentally is a religious behavior, this kind of zealousness toward something that can land at the top of a value hierarchy. And it's like some people's value hierarchy is, let's say, in ridiculous disarray, and there's no arrangement. There's no organized system of belief, let's say, like a religion, but there's not necessarily a disconnect from being religious. I think that is the human universal, is that we are in fact religious. And arising from that would be the variability of the individual belief, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have beliefs. It just doesn't mean that they have to be organized beliefs. But people who have organized beliefs are usually organized around a community model of belief, because I believe and using the word believe here, like colloquially, like I've come to understand that when you aim at any high order good, doesn't matter what it is, it's always going to be a communal endeavor. You'll never be the best version of yourself if you're by yourself. It's not even possible. It's a silly thing. You got to be with a group.
We're made to be part of a group. That's the truth.
Right. And so that's why I think it's the case that calling out the let's call it the inflammation of zealousness in the wrong categories, or even let's say when something that is a good gets isolated from other goods and it becomes something that's wholesale, the only thing that matters now. Everything else can be sacrificed on the altar of this one good, right?
And even must be. Even at that point, they say not only can it be, they say it must be.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it must be. This is a moral necessity that you agree with me because of my level of moral outrage or zealousness, or however you want to describe that. Yeah, I can totally see that. And even in a political model, it works exactly the same. I agree with you. Yes. I've come to call this pendulum thinking, right? Where it's like there's the two extremes and no one can safely land in the middle. There's always the motion constantly back and forth between the two extremes.
Yeah, and in fact, if you try to, even now, you can try this. You find a narrative on MSNBC, like they'll say that Kyle Rittenhouse is a monster, and you turn over to Fox News and they'll say Kyle Rittenhouse is the greatest hero that ever lived. Right. You try to find the nuance in there, And who's going to hate you? Fox News viewers and MSNBC viewers.
That's
MSNBC
right.
is going to call you a Fox News guy. Fox News guy is going to call you MSNBC. And then where can you go? Because you don't have any, if you stick with it, you wouldn't have any friends if you can't learn to. So some people are like, well, damn, I've got to either call him a monster or, and incidentally, you ask him. The thing I mentioned about Kyle a year ago was I said, okay, I work with radicalization, but a big part of that is community resilience. And I said, with all the law enforcement and emergency management and private industry owners that I work with, I can say that no matter what your intentions are, even with the most noblest intentions, you would never carry a weapon that you're not registered to and trained with into a riot, with other untrained people. You wouldn't do that. You would coordinate with law enforcement. You would coordinate with the industry owner. You would have documented proof that you had coordinated with law enforcement, and you'd be working with a team of people. This is what community resilience specialists would do. However, MSNBC and Fox News hates me saying that. Not the actual, I'm sure the pundits would too, but viewers of each are like, you're missing the point. He's a monster, or you're missing the point. He's a hero. They don't want to talk about the nuances. They're absolutely fixated on either condemning him or praising him for exactly the same reason that you're saying. That it's
Right.
got to be one of those two ends of the pendulum.
Guys, we do have an audience question here. Jordan
Okay.
Thornburg asked, I'm just curious what book Darwin said that about natural selection. And welcome to Richard. I really like his attitude and appreciate it. Thank you,
Thanks,
Jordan.
I think it was in the 6th version of, what was his first book? What was the very first book that he put out?
Darwin.
It was Origin of Species.
Origin of Species. The sixth version of that, because he had already been. In fact, the 6th version is the one to read because he received so much critique that he had to go back and say, "Look, here's what I mean when I say this." So the 6th version, Origin of Species, and that was one of the first things. And where it came from was another atheist, who. Or another evolutionist who was saying, why are you saying natural selection when you and I have already said that there is no guiding selector? And he had to address that. So yeah, Origin of Species, 6th edition.
Right. And I think the reason why JD got so kind of like focused on the worldview aspect of that question is primarily because it's almost like that, especially for the theist, because we actually see the idea of creation, intent, and purpose behind what's around us. And so we assume that that's the first thing is intention and purpose. And to say the purpose, what's the purpose of your zeal? You're saying there is zeal. It will always be. And this is how it manifests. It's not necessarily bad. It can just go awry. Right.
Right. Yeah, and everything that I say could still fit in with the Christian worldview because we could say God exists. He made us a certain way. He has chemicals that help us do things that we need to do, and sometimes those chemicals, lead us astray. Stephen Meyer says in Return of the God Hypothesis, he says, because there's the existence of evil and damage and destruction outside of God, then obviously you're going to have some things go wrong, but that's not because God made them that way, but because, just there's that damage. So you could still be a theist and still say, okay, yeah, there's chemicals in our brain that make us do, and think some weird stuff. And that's okay. I still believe in God. I don't think that challenges theism at all.
I agree with you actually. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say about something about what influences us. There's a study on songbirds. So with a songbird, they're born with this wiring system that says, as soon as they're born, this wiring system is like telling them, even though it's not really telling them anything because it's just a part of their neurology, but the wiring system is telling them, you're going to sing a song. You're going to grow up and sing a song. And then the bird's answer to that, even though it's not really like that, is like, whatever, I just want to know where my mom is. I'm hungry. I want to know what's going on. And he's not really caring about this wiring system that says you're going to sing a song. And there's a lot of biology that goes into that he's already born with that is going to go into parts of that song. So some of the notes and some of the capabilities of that songbird are just biologically there. He hasn't even heard the song that he's going to sing yet. He's going to, and that song is immaterial and it's out there waiting for him. There's other adults in his community who already know the song. So that song exists. Before he was born, here's that song waiting on him. And here's the bird. He's born with some biology Some of that's going to affect some parts of the song. But now let's say all those adults go away and he grows up by himself. He's still going to sing something. It's just going to be warped and it's going to be kind of simple. But when he gets to the right age where he's really wants to sing that song, then that biology is going to kick in, and there's going to be all those adults singing that song, and he's going to replicate it note for note, and he's going to carry that song forward to the next generation, and other songbirds are going to come. And so in this way, that song survives, generation after generation.
Right.
And it survives, even though it's immaterial, it keeps surviving. And I think something like that goes on with our moral and epistemic tapestry, is that these tapestries are out there waiting for us. And so I was raised Southern Baptist, so there was a Southern Baptist tapestry waiting on me. And it's sort of a rebellious tapestry, because the Southern Baptist Conference Center was really anti-science. That they were really kind of pushing. This is back in the I'm old, I'm in my 50s, but like back in the 80s, the Southern Baptist Conference Center was sometimes saying, well, scientists right now are saying this, but we're saying this, and that's kind of the opposite of what like William Lane Craig or Frank Turek would say. But 20 or 30 years before that, there was a push to not do that, and our church was rebelling against that. So I kind of had that rebellious Southern Baptist tapestry waiting on me. It didn't doom me to be Southern Baptist. Case in point, I'm now not a Christian, but still I still use that language. I still, my church still treats me like I'm a member of the family. All my members of my youth group, we all still hang out with each other. 90% of whom are still Christians, and we just treat each other equally. So that tapestry was waiting on us, and so that tapestry is immaterial, but it has a lot to do with how we act and behave. And so when natural selection comes and checks up on us, they're going to be like, "Yep, you're all taking care of each other. You're treating each other nicely. You're all doing well. You're healthy. Your kids are happy. See you later." And natural selection goes and checks on spiders or something, which again is not what it really does. But that's when I think our morality, a lot of it is based on that. And so if it turns out that it's just not true that there's a source of morality outside of human minds, at least there's something going on where some things like, absolutely torturing innocent things seems to at least be universal. And you can kind of start there. And then from there, you can see where people, ISIS will be the first ones to say, absolutely don't do that, except sometimes, maybe they'd be the first ones to break off from that, and then you'd have other people that would say you would never do that. And then also you have to take care of your parents. And then also you have to do this. And so I think a lot of that morality comes from some biology, some of these wiring systems, and then a lot of it has to do with the conditions that we're born into. And again, I'm not saying that you're doomed to your culture that you're born into, but all of that, I think, influences you so much that those influences will at least last your lifetime.
There's really a lot of variables that go into what influences our everyday choices, right? Choice by choice. There's so many variables that go into that. It's actually, it's ridiculous to even think about, right? But as we start winding down, Richard, first and foremost, I just want to thank you for coming on and your attitude. Man, I love this conversation. Absolutely. A lot of it was over my head. I'm not going to lie. That's kind of why I've just been, just sitting here kind of quiet and just learning from you guys. But there is one thing that I wanted to ask, and it kind of goes back into where JD, I'm not going to go where he was going, but I'm still confused on one thing. How do we know? And whenever I say no, I mean 100% certainty. Is there that? But how do we know we have discovered objective truth? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think we all struggle with that. If you're on this journey that I'm talking about, then you're absolutely fascinated with how do I know? And for me, a lot of it was pragmatic. A lot of it was, okay, like for instance, as an atheist, I think we make up our religions, but I think we don't mean to. I don't think there's like a table full of deceivers who are like, let's call this guy Jesus.
Right.
I think it's based on something, and then some things resonate more than others. And again, I'm the atheist guy, so feel free to dismiss. But I think we make up our religions, but we are on this journey, and we are. I'll agree that we all have this. We're all religious. The way Joshua was saying it, that's my number one message, is that we're all religious in that sense, and that we're looking for this epistemic and moral truth, and that as we discover it, we can feel more certain. And I get that certainty can be misleading. But even when you double check yourself, even when you say, how would I know this? How would I disprove this to myself? Even that's kind of warped by this cultural tapestry that was waiting on you when you were born. Even that kind of affects how you double check yourself. So my answer to that was, at some point I said, look, my kids need lunch tomorrow, so I'm going to make sure they have lunch. And my boss needs this report done. I'm going to make sure I do that. So like these pragmatic steps that I have to get through at the end of the day is something that pulls me out of it to say, okay, look, I think the universe is 14 billion years old. If I don't buy these hamburgers, my kids are going to be screaming at me. So I go buy the hamburgers. And if somebody tells me to demonstrate a 14 billion year old cosmos, I'll do the best I can do. But I have faith. I have faith that, the science on 14 billion year cosmos happened. I have faith that evolution explains why we're here. I'm seriously freaked out by fine tuning. When I learn more stuff about the cosmos and the sun and the angle of the earth, that seriously freaks me out. So I would have a hard time fighting Stephen Meyer on fine tuning. So
dude, honestly, I'm a theist and it still freaks me out. So I'm
so like if somebody wanted to scare me into theism, keep pushing that. At some point, I think this is what I believe. These are like the top 3 reasons. Like I'll tell you right now, my top reason for being atheism is that the fact that we're a species of 7 billion people who seem to operate on certainty and seem to base ourselves on how many other people kind of agree with us. And we have all these different ideas, and some of us, once they're on this journey, is willing to die for it. And we can't all be correct, but we keep behaving as if we are anyway, and we don't seem to care that the other ones don't agree with us. The fact that we're a species that seems to be operating like that, that's my main reason for atheism. That's my number one reason why I think that we're atheists. So
it's kind of a sociological problem, right?
Right. And a scholarly theist would, could tear me apart pretty quickly, and that would be fine. But that's like my pragmatic, quick answer. And then I'm like, okay, I need to walk my dog. And so at some point, what's that?
I was going to say, can I introduce you to something that I think might actually be valuable and kind of bridge some of the gaps without being too, let's say, I'm not trying to like pitch you a new version of Christianity. Okay. So all I'm doing is I'm going to kind of give you something that's helped me a lot of the way for the last year and a half, kind of make sense of things in a way that I had not really had access to before. And I thought a lot like what you're describing right now, only the conclusion I came to was that theism is true. And the theistic model that I feel maps onto reality and explains human experience best is Christianity, right? But beyond that, understanding that, like you said, that's all good and fine as that abstraction, like in this non-existent space in my mind, but really my kids need to be fed these things that I'm doing in real life, these immediacies. That's really, like, honestly, like, past that, whatever, like, okay. So the reason I mention this is because I've come to realize that there's, in some sense, 4 things, let's say, that what the reality, the universe, let's say, the reality that the universe is and our interaction with it. Well, that's what I mean by reality, right? Both of those things together. Reality is made of 4 different things, right?
Okay.
And kind of in this order for humans specifically. And I think this also has explanatory power for the problem that you're addressing. The first thing that the universe is made of, always, the first thing it's made of is meaning and participatory meaning.
Okay.
Right. That's the first thing that the universe is made of. And it's the first thing that we interact with. When I see what's behind you, I don't just see black lines and shiny other lines. I see a shelf full of books. I have information in mind. When I see books, I also have the action, the behavioral pattern, let's say, of grasping a book using my forefinger and my thumb and opening pages delicately using the dexterity of my fingers. All of those action patterns are built right into the shelf behind you as I look at it. It's really just so deep being able to perceive that. It's all meaning, right? Second is purpose, because that's either what's inherent or what we attribute to it, depending on whether you're, let's say, you're an atheist, you think we attribute meaning and purpose. I'm saying we directly perceive it because that's exactly what the universe is actually made of first, is meaning and purpose. And then we can discuss the material composition of any given material object within our perception, the reality that we're interfacing with or we're interacting with, right? It's like the gripability and drinkability of the water in my cup isn't something that I can reduce to its material composition. It's irrelevant that it's made of H2O. The action pattern that I'm doing is actually part of my physiology, but it's also part of my decision making. There's so much involved there. You can't just reduce it to atoms and so forth, right? It's like the first thing it's made of is the meaning and the purpose. Then you can talk about its material reality, and then you can reduce it to something like numerical value. Those are the four things that I think the universe is made of, especially because of existentially how we kind of interact with and participate with the universe while we live and while we move, while we breathe, while we make decisions, while we confront the future as it comes to us moment by moment. And as you said, there are things that we then can derive from our experiences and our participations to be, let's say, the most or more than the average thing when you wake up in the morning and you have a hierarchy of value that you're going to pursue throughout the day that's going to guide your decision making. But the anomalies that come at you, you have to be able to deal with them. So it's not just like influences directly causing your decision making. They inform your decision making, but they don't cause it. So there's something about you that isn't just material causation. Right. That's kind of the thing that's interacting with the universe. So you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do see that. And I would even say that even atheists with that tapestry who are on this zealous journey, even they think that to some degree, they just might have a different idea about how the meaning and purpose get in there.
Right. And I agree with you. That's probably the difference, is whether or not those things should be reversed. The universe is first made of the abstraction of math. Then we can see it as material reality. And then we can attribute to it purpose and meaning, right? They reverse the order. But I think that's still the four things the universe is actually made of. But I think that because of what you're describing, you probably would see what I mean when I reverse the order of that and say meaning and purpose comes first, then material composition, then numerical value. That's what we're actually interacting with when we look at what's the universe and myself in it.
Right. And if I was a lawyer who was trying to argue for your side of it, I would say fine tuning is probably the best evidence that meaning and purpose were first, because you would need that in order for all these.
Yes, at least purpose. Yeah, exactly.
Astronomically, things to come true, you would probably need meaning and purpose first. Otherwise, you'd have to argue that all these astronomical things happen first, and then we stumbled on meaning and purpose. So
good luck with that.
Richard,
that's difficult.
Richard, I really appreciate. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say my final answer to what you were saying before about how do you know, is that I think for some of us we just say this is good enough. This is I think I've listed enough. I feel good enough about it, and I need to keep moving. And if we don't say that, then we're just going to sit home and think until we die. And natural selection is not going to they're not going to see us doing well. So at some point you have to keep moving and just say, look, I think I've done enough work and I've figured it out. So it's sort of a cop out, but I think I think humans, at least most of us have to do that, because we all have different ideas. At some point, we say this is good enough, and we have to keep moving.
I can see that. I mean, I'll put it like this. I told this to my wife the other day, but the more answers you come to, the more questions that you have about those answers. That's one of those things that are natural, within us. It's like, as humans, we always, and it starts from such a very young age. My daughter's getting ready to start doing it. I know she is. Why, daddy? Why, daddy? Why, daddy? Why, daddy? Because I said so, girl. But regardless, I do get what you're saying. Josh, is there any final things that you want to ask Richard, or just say before we start, or before we wrap up?
I honestly just thank you 100% for your respect and your manners. You're a very agreeable kind of guy, and I appreciate the way that you're approaching the situation and the questions. Maybe you weren't as direct with answers as JD would have liked necessarily for the categorical thinking that he likes to use. But the way that he kind of pressed on the situation, I think really explained, let's say, more than one thing about Koukl's question that inspired this. And
but in fact, I just wanted to say my ultimate answer to Koukl is that we all perceive that passion. We all think it's objectively important, even if we can't explain some external source for that objective meaning, or even if we try to come up with something and it doesn't sound very good. We all perceive it. If you're an atheist on this journey, even if you're an atheist who's angry and bitter and attacking religion, you perceive it. So, like, the worst thing, if you're a Christian and you're trying to convert, and I had just reread Greg Koukl's book, so we could talk about it, and we never got to talk about it. So maybe next time. But if you're a Christian and you're reading Greg Koukl's books, Tactics, and you want to talk to an atheist, the last thing you want to do is say what Greg Koukl says, which is, you guys have to be nihilists logically. I'll point out 3 ways in which you're logically tied to nihilism. Don't do that, because even if it's true, let's say all 3 of those things are true, you're going to turn the guy off. Just like a conspiracy theorist believes that we never landed on the moon. If you keep throwing science at him, he's going to freak out. So don't do that. If you have this atheism has to lead to nihilism thing, save that till later. Use the tactics and listen and maybe put those stones in their shoes, and then you can talk about whether they really think it leads to nihilism. But that kind of certainty that he kind of dismissed atheism, I would say to him and anybody to stand to reason, any apologist, that would undercut any of the value that his book otherwise has, and because it really is one of my favorite apologetics books. And I have some. I have even a book signed by apologists like Frank Turk and Sean McDowell and Josh McDowell. And I'm going to go meet Greg Koukl next month in Jacksonville, Texas. So I'm not knocking apologists. In fact, some of the Christians who have a really good view of the world, I want to encourage them to keep using tactics, but watch out for this atheism has to lead to nihilism thing, because I think that would undercut the value that otherwise came in that book.
I can see what you mean, I guess. I can say that the way or the manner in which you point something out to somebody has a lot to do with it as well. Right. Because if it's always necessarily delivered like it needs to be some sort of jaw-dropping mic drop moment, it's really not going to land. It's going to go over like a brick cloud, And so kind of looking at that, I agree with you that we should watch how it is that we explain our position or explain our understanding of someone else's position, and watch how it is that we're interacting that way, because it is a quick disengagement for people sometimes.
Right.
But I think that there's something really biting about pointing out the implication of someone else's worldview, where sometimes it's the thing that's necessary, but it'll still be biting. So it's not pointing it out, but like you said, not making that the front page, so to speak, and kind of addressing someone person to person first and appealing to all of those things that you do have overlap to, and then maybe staging a case for the importance of those things that you don't have overlap with, that you feel yourself correct about, whereas the other person is incorrect, so as to not be like a club, like we were saying before, not using your trap of your own certainty to kind of distance you from other people, and then you have to exist necessarily in like an echo chamber or something. So yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I was trying to think like something that David Wood would say, which is one of the more warrior. See, you can come say hi. My youngest daughter is trying to peek in. But then she got bashful and walked away. If David Wood heard what I just said, he would say, look, young man, even though I'm probably older than him, I'm in my 50s. He would say, look, I'm sorry, this might hurt your feelings, but I deal in facts, and I'm just dealing in stone cold facts, and you need to be aware. If you were on meth, I wouldn't try to make you feel good about this. I would just show you that meth is dangerous for you. So I need to tell you this, and I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. I get that mentality. And so for people who are like David Wood, go forth. I might not be able to reach you, but if it's possible that people can perceive meaning and value without there being an external source, if that's possible, then some atheists might be doing that, and in which case you could be cutting off the rest of your conversation if that's how you see it. And then even if there is that, maybe you can help them see it by doing dropping the stones in the shoe, which is the Greg Koukl thing. Make them find that out. So many people have converted to Christianity over this. So many people have said, if there's not a foundation for morality, then what's this all about? From C.S. Lewis down to Cy Garte, whatever his name is. I don't mean to say it like that. I honestly don't know how to pronounce it. So many Christians, intellectual Christians, got that way from this argument. So I'm not dismissing the possibility of an external source of morality, but I'm just saying, if you're talking to an atheist who thinks that he's on this moral and epistemic tapestry, and you're telling him that he's logically just no more than nihilism, you're going to cut off communication, even if it's the case. So keep that in mind. The language that he's speaking and his mindset is all about that moral and epistemic tapestry.
Right. Understood. Yeah. I think that's probably really useful advice, though. But I really appreciate you. I thank you so much for being so respectful and so thoughtful. Even if you still disagree with us, we've come to recognize that that's kind of part of the thing that we do here.
Right.
We might have disagreements, but this is one of those times where it's almost kind of bittersweet, because usually we end that with we're all unified in Christ, right? So I just, without feeling too cliche, I do want to invite you to consider the source, so to speak.
Of course, I understand that, and
So-
and I'm open to more conversations about it, and I'm not dead set that it can't be. I just my message was just about from that tactics mindset that Greg Koukl has in his book. To try to keep that in mind when you're talking to other people, especially if they're convinced, if they're absolutely convinced, it's going to be a long journey. Assuming that that's the case, it's going to be a long journey to get them past that. And saying that it's nihilistic is probably the end of that
counterproductive in the moment. Yeah.
Right.
Fair enough.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate this conversation. Rich, you're more than welcome to come back on anytime, brother, to talk and just do what we did tonight, man. Like I said, I've still got questions. I've still got, disagreements and stuff. But the fact, like Josh was saying, and like you were saying, the fact that we can come together, talk about these things, and still walk away disagreeing, I can say that I have a better understanding of where you're coming from. And for me, that's a win. And so I really appreciate it.
That's all about tactics too, is learning how the other people think.
That's right. That's right. So Josh, go ahead and take us out, man.
Well, I appreciate you joining us again, and Tyler, you did a great job of tracking where you did, and it sucked that JD's microphone was having issues at first. I hope that wasn't too distracting for anybody that's watching, but if anybody's made it this far into the conversation, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you like this content, subscribe to the channel. You can find us on all the podcast outlets, and thank you for tuning in. And everybody, have a good night, and thank you for listening.
Thanks for having me.